The night was quiet on the far edge of the colony, where few dared to live. The human, a simple worker named Daniel, was repairing the broken lights outside his small cabin. He lived alone, far from the busy trade routes and the grand homes of the alien lords. His days were usually silent, filled with hard work, and his nights lonely. Yet this night would change everything. A sudden rumble shook the ground. Daniel looked up and saw a shuttle descending near his home. He frowned, wiping the sweat from his brow. Deliveries never came this far, not to a man who had no wealth or status. He set his tools aside and stepped closer, his eyes sharp with suspicion. The shuttle door opened with a hiss, and two armored carriers stepped out. Between them was a figure draped in chains, her head bowed, her skin pale and glowing faintly under the colony moonlight. Daniel's heart raced as he saw her. She was not human, her features delicate, her eyes hidden by fear, her arms bound with silver restraints. One of the carriers thrust a data pad into Daniel's hands. "Gift delivered, as ordered," the alien grunted. Daniel blinked in confusion. "Gift? What gift?" "I ordered nothing," he replied firmly. But the carriers did not listen. They left her at his feet, returned to their shuttle, and vanished into the sky before Daniel could demand answers. For a long moment he stood frozen. The girl raised her head slowly and he saw her eyes, large, shimmering, filled with terror. She spoke in a trembling voice. "Please do not send me back." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had heard rumors of alien lords who treated people, especially women, as possessions. Gifts were not meant to be cherished, but to be broken. He clenched his fists, anger rising inside him. He had done nothing to deserve this, yet now fate had dropped a life into his hands. "Who are you?" he asked carefully. The girl shivered and whispered her name. Lyra. She told him in fragments how she had been chosen as a tribute, wrapped in chains and promised as an offering to some highborn master. But something had gone wrong, and she had been sent to him. Instead, Daniel's thoughts spun. If the lords discovered the mistake, they would come. If he returned her, perhaps he could avoid trouble. But when his eyes met hers, he saw more than fear. He saw desperation, a silent cry for freedom. "You should not be here," he muttered. Yet his hands moved to unlock her restraints. The silver cuffs fell with a sharp clang against the ground. She gasped softly as her arms were freed, rubbing her wrists where the metal had bitten into her skin. The cabin felt smaller as the weight of the decision pressed on him. Every instinct told him to push her away, to avoid the wrath of the alien rulers. Yet his heart, the stubborn human heart, refused. He could not return her like a parcel, not after seeing her tremble, not after hearing her plead. She sat on the edge of his table, eyes darting to the door with every sound of the night wind. "They will come for me," she whispered. "They will punish you if they find me here." Daniel poured a glass of water and handed it to her. "Then we better make sure they never find out," he said quietly. She looked at him, startled. No one had ever spoken to her with such resolve. As the hours passed, he listened to her story. She explained how her people believed gifts like her were tokens of loyalty, sacrifices meant to prove obedience. She had been taken from her family, stripped of her dignity and marked as property. To her shock, this human did not treat her as an object. He treated her as a person. Daniel sat back, rubbing his temples. He had lived a quiet life, never stirring trouble, never inviting danger. But now he was part of something larger, whether he liked it or not. The girl sitting in his home was more than a mistake. She was a test of his humanity. He studied her as she wrapped herself in one of his blankets, her body trembling with both cold and fear. She was fragile, yet beneath her fear was strength. He could see it in her eyes, a spark waiting for someone to protect it. The night grew deeper. Daniel kept glancing at the door, expecting armored soldiers to break it down at any moment. But no one came. Only silence filled the cabin, broken by the sound of her soft breathing as she finally allowed herself to rest. Daniel looked at her one last time before blowing out the lamp. His mind was a storm, torn between fear and duty. He knew what the right thing to do was, even if it meant danger. He could not return her. He would never return her. And as the moonlight fell across his floor, Daniel whispered to himself, "She is mine to protect now." Morning light crept through the thin curtains of Daniel's small cabin. He sat at the wooden table staring at the cup of bitter tea in his hands. His eyes were red from a night without rest. Across the room, wrapped in his old blanket, Lyra was still asleep. Her breathing was soft, almost fragile, as if she feared even in her dreams. Daniel's mind spun like a storm. He had two clear choices: return her to the alien authorities and stay safe, or keep her here and risk everything. It sounded simple, but his heart made it impossible. He had seen the way her body shook when she spoke of her people. He had seen the scars on her wrists from the silver cuffs. Sending her back would mean sending her into cruelty, maybe even death. Lyra stirred awake, her eyes blinking in the pale light. She saw him watching her, and quickly sat up, clutching the blanket, closer to her body. For a moment she looked ready to beg again, but then her lips trembled as she whispered, "Do you hate me for being here?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I don't hate you. But I don't understand why they sent you to me. I'm no lord, I'm no master. I'm just a man with a cabin and some tools." She lowered her gaze. "To them, it does not matter. They see us as things, gifts, objects to be traded. If you send me back, they will laugh at you, then they will break me." Her voice cracked at the end, and she pressed her hands against her face to hide her tears. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He was never good with words, but he could not stand to see her cry. He stood, walked across the room, and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You're not going back, not while I have breath in my body." Her eyes widened. She searched his face, trying to see if he meant it. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. Daniel struggled for the right words. At last he answered, "Because you are not a thing. Because you deserve to live free." The silence that followed was heavy, yet full of meaning. She looked at him as if no one had ever spoken such words to her before. Then slowly she nodded. The decision had been made. Daniel felt it settle deep inside him like a stone dropping into water. He would protect her. He would defy the alien lords if he had to. He did not know how, but he knew he could not betray his own conscience. Later that day, Daniel prepared his cabin for what was coming. He showed Lyra the hidden cellar beneath the floor, a place where he stored tools and food. He explained how she could hide there if soldiers came knocking. She listened carefully, her fear mixing with a new kind of hope. When she asked why he was doing all this, Daniel gave a tired smile. "Maybe I'm a fool. Maybe I'm stubborn. But once I saw your face, once I heard your voice, I knew I couldn't hand you over, not to them." That evening, the colony buzzed with news. Word had spread that a tribute meant for one of the alien lords had gone missing. Search teams were moving from home to home. Neighbors whispered that the human worker on the edge of the colony had received something unusual. Daniel heard the rumors when he went to the marketplace, and he knew the hunters would soon come for him. He hurried back to his cabin, his mind sharp with urgency. Inside, Lyra was waiting by the window. She could see the worry on his face even before he spoke. "They are searching," he said quietly. "They will come here soon." Her body stiffened. "You should not do this for me," she whispered. "If they punish you, if they kill you, it will be my fault." Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. "No. If they come for me, it will be because I chose to stand. Do you understand? This is my decision, not yours." For a moment, she looked at him with awe. She had lived her whole life under command, under force, under chains. But this human spoke of choice, of will, of sacrifice. It was something she had never been offered before. That night, Daniel lay awake again. He thought about the life he had lived until now, quiet, empty, safe. He had never dreamed of being a hero, never wanted to challenge the powers that ruled over the colony. Yet now he found himself at the edge of rebellion, with only one reason to fight: a frightened girl who trusted him more than anyone else. The decision burned inside him. He knew he could not turn back. He would protect her no matter the cost. Outside, the cold wind carried the sound of patrol ships moving closer. The hunt had begun. Daniel whispered into the darkness, "They will not take you. Not while I stand." And with that vow, his fate was sealed. The days that followed were filled with tension. Daniel tried to keep his routine normal, repairing machines for the colony and trading in the marketplace, but whispers followed him wherever he went. Neighbors glanced at him with suspicion. Some looked away when his eyes met theirs, while others leaned close to one another, muttering words he could not hear. He knew what they were talking about: the missing tribute, the girl who never reached her master, the human who lived alone at the edge of town. Back at his cabin, Lyra stayed hidden most of the time. Daniel had shown her the cellar beneath the floor, and she spent hours there when he left for work. It was dark and cramped, but she endured it without complaint. She feared discovery more than the darkness. Every time Daniel returned, she rushed to meet him, relief in her eyes as if she had doubted he would come back at all. One evening, as Daniel sat sharpening his tools, she broke the silence. "They are speaking of me, aren't they?" she asked, her voice low. Daniel paused, then nodded. "The rumors are spreading. They'll start searching homes more carefully. It's only a matter of time." Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. "Then you must let me go. I can run far, hide in the mountains. If they catch me here, you will suffer too." But Daniel shook his head firmly. "No. If you run, you won't survive. And if you're caught, they will make an example of you. The safest place for you is here, with me." For a moment she looked at him in disbelief, as if she could not understand why anyone would choose danger for her sake. Then slowly she whispered, "You are not like them. You are not like anyone I have known." Daniel said nothing. He kept his eyes on the blade in his hands, but inside her words cut deep. He had never been seen as different, never been marked as special. Yet to her, his choice to protect her was something rare, something that gave her hope. The next day, patrols moved closer. Alien soldiers in black armor marched through the streets, their boots striking the ground in unison. They questioned families, searched storage houses, and checked records. A neighbor warned Daniel that soldiers had been asking about the man who lived alone on the outskirts. That night, Daniel prepared for the worst. He dug new tunnels beneath the cabin, linking the cellar to the woods beyond. He placed food and water in small sacks, ready for escape if soldiers came pounding on his door. Lyra watched him work, silent at first, then finally asking, "Why do you fight so hard for me? You don't even know me." Daniel stopped, wiping dirt from his hands. He looked at her with steady eyes. "Because it's wrong what they've done to you. Because I can't stand by and watch cruelty win." She lowered her gaze, her heart heavy with emotions she could not name. In her world, strength was measured by domination, by how well one could command or control. Yet this human measured strength by compassion. He was willing to risk his life not to own her, but to set her free. As days passed, their bond grew stronger. She began to help him with small tasks, cooking, repairing, keeping watch at the window. Though fear still lingered in her, she carried herself with a little more confidence now. Sometimes, she even smiled. But outside, the colony was boiling, with unrest. Other humans whispered to Daniel in secret, asking if the rumors were true. Some begged him to return the tribute before it brought ruin on them all. Others, however, spoke with quiet admiration. "If you really kept her," one man whispered, "then maybe you are braver than the rest of us. Maybe we need to stop bowing to them." Those words planted seeds in Daniel's mind. Was this only about one girl? Or was it about something greater? If others felt the same anger, the same desire for dignity, then maybe his choice could ignite something bigger than himself. Late, one evening, as storm clouds rolled across the sky, Daniel and Lyra sat by the fire. The wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, but inside was warmth. Lyra spoke softly, almost afraid of her own words. "Do you know why they send gifts like me?" Daniel turned to her. "Tell me." Her eyes reflected the firelight. "It is not only a tribute, it is a test. They want to see who obeys without question, who accepts humiliation with silence. To them, we are experiments. They want to know if humans can be bent the same way." Daniel's jaw tightened. The truth was darker than he had feared. Keeping her was not just rebellion, it was a direct challenge to the system that controlled them all. He stood pacing across the room. "Then we will show them the answer," he said, his voice steady with determination. "We are not things. We will not bend." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in her life, she felt the spark of something she had never dared imagine. Freedom. As thunder cracked above the cabin, Daniel gripped the edge of the table and whispered a vow, not just to her, but to himself and to all who lived in chains. "They can send their soldiers, they can spread their fear, but I will never give you back. Not to them, not ever." The storm raged outside, but inside a new storm had been born. The storm of rebellion, carried in the whispers of a human who chose to defy. The colony grew restless as soldiers spread through the streets like a tightening net. Their black armor reflected the pale moons above, and their heavy boots echoed against the stone paths. Every door they passed seemed to shrink, every window shuddered in fear. People whispered that the alien lord himself had demanded answers. The tribute was missing, and someone had to pay. Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before they reached his cabin. He worked quickly, reinforcing the cellar, hiding supplies in secret compartments, and checking the escape tunnel he had dug days earlier. His hands were steady, but inside his chest his heart beat like a drum. Lyra stayed close, helping where she could, though fear flickered in her eyes with every distant sound of marching boots. One evening, while Daniel was sealing the trapdoor, she spoke in a low voice. "You cannot fight them all. If they come here, you will fall, and I will be dragged back." Daniel looked up at her, sweat streaking his brow. "Maybe I cannot fight them all, but I can fight long enough to make them think twice. That might be enough." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to protest, but no words came. Instead, she placed her hand over his, stopping him from working. "I never asked you to carry this burden," she whispered. He shook his head. "You didn't need to. I chose it." That night, the sound of shouts carried through the colony streets. Soldiers raided a home not far away, dragging out a frightened family accused of hiding someone. Daniel and Lyra listened in silence as the cries echoed across the hills. Lyra hugged her knees to her chest, her body shaking. Daniel sat beside her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "They will not stop," she said through trembling lips. "No, they won't," Daniel admitted. "But neither will I." The next morning, patrols reached the outer edge of the colony. Daniel watched from the trees as they questioned his nearest neighbor. The man pointed nervously toward Daniel's cabin, then looked away quickly as if ashamed. Daniel returned home with grim certainty. "They will be here soon," he told Lyra. Her eyes widened. "Then we must flee now before it is too late." But Daniel shook his head. "If we run too early, they will follow and catch us. If we stand our ground, maybe we can slip away in the chaos." That evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Daniel prepared his weapons: a rusted rifle, a sharpened blade, and traps made from farming tools. Lyra watched him in silence, then finally asked, "Why risk your life for me? Why not save yourself?" Daniel paused, meeting her gaze. "Because if I let them take you, then I would not be living anymore. I would just be breathing." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to speak, to tell him what it meant to her, but fear and emotion tangled in her throat. Instead, she helped him place the traps around the cabin, her hands steady despite the dread in her heart. As night fell, shadows moved between the trees. Daniel saw them first, armored soldiers spreading out surrounding the cabin. The hunt had begun. He motioned for Lyra to hide in the cellar, but she shook her head. I will not leave you alone." He frowned, but her determination was clear. "Then stay close to me," he said. The first knock came hard, shaking the wooden door on its hinges. A deep voice called out, "Open in the name of the Lord." Daniel gripped his rifle, his voice steady. "This is a human's home. You have no right to enter without proof." The door burst open before he finished speaking. Soldiers stormed, in their weapons raised, their glowing visors sweeping across the room. Daniel fired first, the rifle's roar shaking the cabin. A soldier fell, armor dented. Another trap snapped shut, catching a soldier's leg and pulling him down. Chaos erupted. The cabin filled with shouts, gunfire, and the clash of metal. Lyra ducked behind the table, her heart pounding as she watched Daniel fight. He moved with fierce determination, his every strike a promise that she would not be taken. The soldiers were trained, but Daniel fought with something stronger, desperation and defiance. He struck, he blocked, he bled, yet he did not stop. One soldier reached for Lyra, but she grabbed a knife from the floor and slashed, her fear turning into raw courage. The fight spilled into the night. Flames from the overturned lamp lit the cabin, casting long shadows. Daniel pulled Lyra toward the escape tunnel. "Go," he ordered, his breath ragged. She shook her head. "Not without you." "I'll be right behind you," he promised, shoving her toward the trapdoor. Reluctantly, she obeyed, crawling into the darkness below. Daniel turned back, swinging his blade against the last soldier in the room. Pain seared through his arm, but he did not falter. Finally, silence fell. The cabin was ruined, but the soldiers were down. He stumbled into the tunnel, sealing the trapdoor behind him. Lyra was waiting, her eyes wide with fear and relief. She touched his arm, seeing the blood. "You're hurt." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Better me than you." They crawled through the tunnel, the sounds of more soldiers gathering above. The hunt was far from over, but they had escaped, for now. As they emerged into the dark woods, Daniel looked back at the faint glow of his burning cabin. His home was gone, his quiet life destroyed. Yet beside him stood the girl he had chosen to protect, her hand gripping his tightly. The hunt had begun, but so had their fight for freedom. The woods stretched out like an endless maze, shadows twisting between tall trees under the light of twin moons. Daniel moved carefully, his injured arm pressed against his chest while Lyra walked beside him, holding his other hand as if afraid he might vanish in the dark. Behind them, the faint glow of the burning cabin faded into the distance, but the echo of the fight still rang in their ears. Every sound in the forest felt sharper that night. The rustle of leaves, the crack of branches, even the hoot of nightbirds made Lyra flinch. Daniel's eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. He knew soldiers would not stop at the cabin. They would spread their search deeper into the wild, and the hunt would not end until both of them were caught. They reached a clearing where Daniel paused to catch his breath. His shirt was torn, blood soaking the sleeve where a blade had cut him. Lyra tore a strip from her own dress and carefully wrapped it around his arm. Her fingers trembled, but her face carried determination. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now let me save you." Daniel gave her a faint smile. "I'm not finished yet, we need to keep moving." But before they could step forward, a distant horn split the night air. The sound was deep, commanding, and filled with menace. Lyra froze. "They're calling reinforcements," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we make them work for it." They pushed deeper into the woods, guided by faint trails and Daniel's memory of the land. He had hunted here many times before, though never with soldiers chasing him. The air grew colder, mist rising from the ground, wrapping around the trees like ghostly fingers. By midnight, they reached an abandoned watchtower from the old war. Its stones were cracked, vines curling up its walls, yet it still stood tall, against the night sky. Daniel led Lyra inside, guiding her up the stairs to the upper level. From there, they could see torchlights moving through the forest, lines of soldiers spreading like fire. Lyra pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. "There are so many." Daniel studied the movements below. They'll sweep the forest in waves. If we stay here, we'll be trapped. We need to strike first when they least expect it. Her eyes snapped to him. Strike? Against them? That's madness. He shook his head. It's survival. If we wait for them, they'll surround us. If we hit them in the dark, maybe we can slip through. For a long moment, Lyra said nothing. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she nodded. Tell me what to do. Together, they set traps in the ruins, loose stones ready to fall, sharpened sticks hidden in the undergrowth, and small fires prepared to ignite at the right moment. Daniel explained each step, his voice calm, his movement steady, though inside, his blood raced. He knew this night would decide everything. When the soldiers finally reached the tower, the forest came alive with chaos. A line of armored men stepped into the clearing, their torches lighting the dark. They moved slowly, weapons raised, scanning the shadows. Daniel gave a signal. Lyra dropped a torch into the brush below, and flames roared up, forcing the soldiers back. Arrows whistled from hidden spots Daniel had prepared, striking the ground at their feet. Shouts filled the air as confusion spread among the hunters. Then Daniel attacked. He leapt from the tower, crashing into the soldiers with wild force. Gamta. Blade clashed against their armor, sparks flying in the night. Lyra, from above, threw stones and burning wood, creating panic in their ranks. The battle was fierce. Daniel's body screamed with pain, but his spirit burned brighter. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, every strike fueled by the promise he had made, to protect her. Soldiers fell, the firelight dancing across their broken lines. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched him fight. She wanted to cry out, to run to him, but she knew her role. She kept throwing, kept shouting warnings when danger closed in. For the first time, she felt like more than a victim. She was his ally, standing with him against the darkness. When the last soldier dropped, silence returned to the forest. The flames crackled, painting the tower in orange light. Daniel stumbled, his chest heaving, his blade dripping with sweat and blood. Lyra rushed down the steps, catching him as he nearly fell. You can't keep doing this, she said, tears filling her eyes. They'll send more, they'll never stop. Daniel leaned against her, his voice low but steady. Then we won't stop either. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time she believed him. He wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting for something larger, something that even she could not yet name. The two of them slipped back into the shadows of the forest, leaving the broken soldiers behind. Above, the moons glowed bright, casting light on their path. The night raid was over, but the war for their freedom had only just begun. The forest stretched for miles, but even its deepest shadows could not hide them forever. Daniel and Lyra moved quietly through the undergrowth, guided by the faint glow of the twin moons above. His wounds burned with every step, yet he pressed on, his grip firm around her hand. Behind them, horns echoed again, distant, but relentless. The soldiers were regrouping, and the chase had not ended. By dawn, they reached the edge of the forest where the land broke into wide plains. Beyond those plains lay the old border, a rusted fence marking the end of the colony's reach and the beginning of wild territory no lord truly controlled. For many, the border was a warning. To Daniel, it looked like the only chance of survival. He stopped at the crest of a hill, breathing hard, his eyes scanning the horizon. If we cross that line, we'll be beyond their laws, he said. It won't be safe, but it will be ours. Lyra looked at the rusted fence shimmering in the distance. Her heart pounded. Freedom lay just beyond it, but between them and that border stretched open ground with no place to hide. If the soldiers caught them there would be no escape. We will have to fight, Daniel said grimly. Not long after, dust rose behind them, columns of soldiers marching fast, their black armor flashing in the morning light. At the center rode a tall figure in crimson robes, his face hidden behind a golden mask. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Lord himself has come, she whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He had expected soldiers, but not the master of them all. Yet something inside him hardened. If the Lord had come to claim what he believed was his, then Daniel would show him the truth, that no human would bow, and no life could be owned. He guided Lyra to a ridge of stones near the border, where they could stand with the rising sun at their backs. "Stay behind me," he told her, but she shook her head fiercely. "No, I will stand with you." The soldiers formed a line blocking their path. The golden-masked lord stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp as steel. "Human, you have something that belongs to me. Surrender the tribute and your death will be swift. Refuse and both of you will suffer." Daniel's voice rang clear across the field. "She does not belong to you, she never did." A ripple of murmurs ran through the soldiers. The Lord's hand twitched, as if tempted to strike him down where he stood. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded. Daniel's jaw clenched. "I don't care who you are. You call her a gift, but she is not yours to give. She chose to stay with me, and I will not return her." At those words, Lyra stepped forward, trembling but resolute. Her voice shook, yet it carried across the field. "I am not a thing. I am not your token. I am free, and I choose him." The soldiers shifted uneasily, some lowering their weapons slightly. The Lord's fury burned behind the golden mask. "Insolence," he roared. "You defy the order that has stood for centuries. You dare make a claim against me?" Daniel raised his blade, his body aching, yet unyielding. "I dare, because no chain, no law, no fear will ever make me return her. If you want her, you'll have to kill me." Silence stretched for a moment, heavy and tense. The soldiers waited for their lord's command. The golden mask tilted, studying the human who stood defiant. At last the Lord raised his hand and the soldiers advanced. Steel clashed against steel as Daniel fought at the ridge. He struck with everything left in him, every blow echoing his vow. Lyra, armed with a fallen spear, fought beside him. Fear coursed through her veins, but she refused to run. For the first time in her life, she fought not for survival, but for freedom. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light on the battlefield. Soldiers fell, one after another, until even the masked lord hesitated. His voice thundered again, but it no longer carried certainty. "Why do you resist? You are nothing but a man." Daniel, bloodied and breathless, stood tall. "Maybe I'm only a man, but a man who chooses is stronger than a lord who steals." Those words carried across the field, striking deeper than any blade. Some soldiers lowered their weapons fully, doubt creeping into their eyes. The order they had served suddenly seemed less unshakable. The Golden Lord realized the danger. His system of fear and obedience had cracked, not by an army, but by the defiance of one human and the courage of one girl who refused to be a gift. He turned sharply, signaling retreat. The soldiers withdrew slowly, torn between duty and doubt. The golden mask glared back once, but the fight was over. Daniel leaned against the ridge, his strength nearly gone. Lyra caught him, holding him upright, her eyes shining with tears. "You stood against him," she whispered. "You gave me more than freedom, you gave me a voice." Daniel placed his hand gently on hers. "And you gave me a reason to fight." Together, they crossed the border as the sun lit the plains. They were not safe, not yet, but they were free. And freedom, once tasted, could never be taken away. The border was behind them, yet Daniel and Lyra did not stop. They walked until their legs could carry them no further, until the rising sun turned the sky into fire. At last they reached a quiet valley where the grass grew tall and the sound of birds filled the air. Here there were no soldiers, no walls, no masters, only open land and freedom. Daniel collapsed onto the soft earth, his body aching from wounds and exhaustion. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding on his arm, her eyes filled with worry. "You cannot keep pushing yourself like this. You'll break before they do." He gave her a faint smile, his voice rough but steady. "If I break, it will be while protecting you. That's a choice I can live with." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she wiped them quickly. "Do not speak of breaking. You have carried me from chains to freedom. You cannot fall now, not when we have come this far." For the first time since they met, Lyra's voice carried no fear. It carried strength. Daniel saw it in her eyes. She was no longer the trembling girl chained in silver. She was someone reborn. As the day passed, they built a small fire and gathered what little food they had left. Daniel sat quietly, watching the smoke rise into the blue sky. His thoughts drifted, back to the golden-masked lord and the soldiers who had obeyed without question. He knew this was not the end. They might return stronger and angrier. Yet he also knew something had changed. The doubt he had seen in the soldiers' eyes would spread. His defiance, and Lyra's courage, had planted a seed. Lyra sat close, her shoulder brushing against his. For a long time they said nothing, content to share silence. At last she whispered, "When they gave me as a gift, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never belong anywhere again. But you never saw me as theirs. You made me yours." Daniel turned his head, meeting her gaze. "Not mine to own," he said softly. "Mine to protect, mine to stand beside, that's all I ever wanted." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "And that is all I ever needed." That night, under the blanket of stars, they rested. The fire crackled gently, the air cool but calm. For the first time, Lyra slept without fear, her head resting against Daniel's chest. He stayed awake, watching the stars, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. Each sound reminded him why he had fought, why he had bled, why he had chosen a path that could not be undone. At dawn, voices stirred in the valley. Daniel rose quickly, blade in hand, but what he saw froze him in place. A group of humans approached, families, farmers, laborers, faces worn with hardship yet lit with hope. They had followed the whispers, the rumors of a human who had defied the alien lord and refused to return a girl treated as property. One of them stepped forward, a tall woman with calloused hands. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did you face the Lord and live?" Daniel glanced at Lyra, then back at the crowd. "It's true," he said. "But I didn't stand alone. She stood with me." The people looked at Lyra, and for a moment she shrank under their stares. But then Daniel's hand closed around hers, steady and firm. With his support, she lifted her chin and spoke. "I am not a gift. I am not property. I chose to be here. And if one human can defy them, then all of you can too." The crowd murmured, voices rising with courage. They had been waiting for someone to speak what they all felt, but never dared say. Daniel saw it in their eyes, the same fire that had carried him this far. From that day, the valley became more than a hiding place. It became a gathering ground. People came, bringing supplies, bringing stories, bringing hope. The rebellion had begun, not with an army, but with a man who refused to surrender and a woman who refused to bow. Weeks later, as Daniel sat by the fire with Lyra at his side, he looked at her and saw not the frightened girl who had been delivered to his door, but the partner who had chosen him freely. She was no longer chained by silver. She was bound only by her own will, and that will was strong. "You know," he said quietly, "when they first left you at my door, I thought it was a mistake. I thought I was cursed. And now?" she asked, tilting her head. He smiled, his eyes soft. "Now I know it was the greatest gift I ever received. Not because they gave you, but because you stayed." Lyra reached for his hand, her voice steady. "I stayed because you made me yours. Not with chains, not with fear, but with love." The firelight danced across their faces as the night deepened. Around them, the murmur of people planning their future filled the air. Yet in that moment there was only the two of them. Two souls who had chosen each other in defiance of a world that called them nothing. And so it was true. She had been sent as a gift to the wrong man. But he never returned her. Instead, he made her his own. Not as property, but as partner, as family, as the reason he would never bend.